Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football Scout FPL tips video for Game Week 18. My name's Rich and as always I'm going to run through a few quick tips ahead of the Game Week 18 deadline. Now obviously this is a really quick turnaround. I'm trying to get this out in the morning, so I'm going to go through stuff pretty quickly. If you're listening, it might be worth popping onto YouTube. You'll be able to see the tables that I've put together quickly this morning. And don't forget to like and subscribe. But what we're going to be going through today is quickly just touching on the fixtures for Game Week 18, which, as I mentioned, is a double game week. We're going to go through the best Chelsea assets who've got a double game week. Same for Fulham. We're going to go through them, and then we're going to discuss captaincy. And I think this week is probably the first week the captaincy is wide open. So first of all, we're going to quickly touch upon the fixtures. Like I said, we've got a double game week for Fulham. They've got Leicester away and Chelsea at home. Chelsea have got Man City at home and then Fulham away in their double. And then it's kind of best of the rest. You've got a lot of single game weeks. The best ones, Southampton have got Forest at home. Probably not a lot of people with Southampton assets. The one a lot of people are struggling with at the moment is Man United have Bournemouth at home. Obviously, absolutely brilliant fixture. You know, players like Rashford. I was looking at selling Rashford to go for Pereira, but I've given my head a bit of a wobble. And I've decided, Rashford is more than good enough, especially as he just had some enforced rest for half of the last game. Then we've got Leicester, I've got Fulham at home. That's probably one that's only going to interest Danny Ward owners. However, a lot of people have players like Kepa, players like Leno. So again, Ward's probably not that relevant this game week, but just worth bearing in mind. If you've only got Ward, for example, potentially you could look at a transfer doing Ward to Leno or Kepa, or if you have to play Ward, that's fair enough. The rest of the fixtures, Man City, what makes this extra interesting this game week is Man City have got Chelsea away. So Haaland, we're going to touch on that in the captaincy, but Haaland's obviously got a tricky fixture. It's the third hardest according to the Fantasy Football Scout ticker. And then we've got Liverpool, got Brentford away. Now, obviously, it's an away game, but, fantastic fixture. So let's not ignore the single game week players. I think players like Rashford, I would definitely play them. Martial is going to be a tricky one because, as we're going to get onto later, I really like Mitrovic this week, as does the Rate My Team tool. So he might be one where maybe you'd look at Martial to Mitrovic. However, it's not a bad fixture and just worth bearing that in mind before we get into the doubles, before we start, doing transfers and having to bench really good assets. So I'd say from the single game weeks, I think Man United are the ones that really do stand out. And a lot of people still haven't replaced Reece James. So maybe Luke Shaw is an option. However, there's the double game week players as well. So let's get straight into those. So first of all, on the screen, I've got Chelsea. So all the Chelsea assets over this season sorted by XGI. And at the very top is Sterling with 5.47. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, it's not as impressive as, a lot of other teams. When we get onto Fulham, you'll see that 5.47 isn't that impressive. But just from underlying data over the season, Sterling is objectively the standout, performer. Standout's probably a bit of a stretch, but Sterling's up there just ahead of Havertz at 4.5, and then we've got Mount at 3.39. So attacking wise, they're not good fixture, they're not good statistics, and obviously they've got Manchester City, who, while Man City have conceded in the last two games, they've only had 2 shots that have actually been on target. The Everton goal, the Gray goal, was 0.08 xg. So a very low percentage chance. So the Man City defence is still really good. I think it's in defence things might be a little more interesting. Obviously, we'll touch on Kepa when we get to captains, funnily enough. But if you're looking to replace James, you've got a couple of options. You could go for Shaw. I think that's a safe bet for this week, even though there's a couple of tough fixtures after that. But I do think Azpilicueta, 0.95 XGI over 13 appearances. Obviously, some of those have been shortened appearances. It's not great. He's not the player he once was. However, it's a double game week. So I've actually gone for Azpilicueta over Shaw. It's a little bit of a gamble, but all sorts of things can happen in a double game week. You can get lucky. You've got twice the chance to do so. Chelsea fans seem to think that Azpilicueta is pretty much nailed, in the short term until, things develop in the transfer window. So I really do like Azpilicueta. And he's pretty much level with Thiago Silva, who, I mean, when you look at it, Azpilicueta's only 4.8 million, Thiago Silva's 5.4. And I think 5.4 is obviously pushing it towards being, a premium defender as it was. So I think from these, I would go for Mount. I think for the price, for the minutes he's going to get, I think he feels quite safe at 7.6 million. But I wouldn't force it. I definitely wouldn't force it. And defender-wise, Cucurella's not actually on this list. He's not, very attacking. However, I think I prefer Cucurella over Azpilicueta. But it's very, very close. So just worth bearing in mind. Koulibaly has had a little bit of stick recently, since his big money move. And I mean, his stats are not that impressive. They're all pretty poor. So I think I'd go Cucurella, if I've got a bit of money to spend. Or if I'm a bit more, concerned with budget, etc., Azpilicueta would be the one that I go for. We move on to Fulham, and now you see why I wasn't that hot on the Chelsea attackers. You look at Mitrovic, obviously a lot of penalties in there, but he's over 10 XGI, so double what Sterling's output is over 14 games. And also what stands out here is Andreas Pereira. Obviously everyone's darling budget enabler at just 4.6 million still, so he's barely risen, 5.29 XGI. Then we move on to people like Bobby De Cordova-Reid, Willian and Harrison Reed. I'd much prefer Pereira over Harrison Reed. I don't think many people have still got him. I mean, if you really want to gamble, someone like Willian, for example, 2.67 XGI over 10 appearances. One of the games against his former club. I mean, it's a punt. It really is a punt. I think for 5.5 million's good. I think I'll try and get to Mount if I've got that spot in my team. And like I said, while we're talking about all these midfielders, there's so many good midfielders at the moment. There's players like Salah. We've already touched on Rashford. It's tricky to find space for these midfielders. So I don't think many people will be going for that. And obviously we've just discussed Kepa. Leno, obviously he's not going to be on the attacking table. But Fulham have got two fixtures that are better than Chelsea's. So I do like Leno as well this week. If you're torn between Kepa and Leno, I think it's a coin flip. I think, if you've got space for one, do it. Defender-wise, I've seen a lot of people going for Tim Ream. And obviously looking at this, Tim Ream over 17 games, which I believe, is a lot more than a lot of these other players, only a 0.39 XGI. So yes, while he scored the other day, it's one of his, a handful of professional goals that Tim Ream's actually scored. Looking at the stats, I mean, Tete is obviously slightly better, 1.06 XGI. I don't think I'd be going for a Fulham defender, though. I think, the keeper, Leno, that seems fine. I think I prefer Azpilicueta to all of the defenders that Fulham have got. But I would say, I mean, you look at these stats for Mitrovic and Pereira, and, I mean, they're absolutely standout. So if you're shopping for a striker, if you're shopping for a midfielder, there'd be two, right up the top of my list, to be honest, and they're completely nailed. Obviously, there's that word of caution on Mitrovic, and we've not done our suspension tightrope that we normally do. But Mitrovic is still on the suspension tightrope, so it's just worth bearing in mind. Mitrovic could, if he gets booked in that Leicester game, he's only going to have a single game week, but at least his best fixture is, it's the first one. It's front loaded. So Mitrovic and Pereira, I know it's quite obvious, but absolutely standout options. And finally, we're going to move on to, and I'm sorry we blasted through this today. I just want to get the video out, before the deadline. I'm recording this about 5 hours before the deadline. But if you're enjoying the video, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week, with a slightly longer video, slightly more detailed video as well. But yeah, so the captaincy, I think this is wide open. The Rate My Team tool on Fantasy Football Scouts agrees, and a lot of podcasts I've listened to, a lot of people are looking away from Haaland as well, and I will be myself. So if we look at the Rate My Team tool, Sterling, who scored in the last game week, is top with 8.4, just ahead of Mitrovic, 7.81. Now, again, it's worth bearing in mind there is a risk of Mitrovic getting suspended. The odds of that, of him getting a yellow card, the betting odds, that is, it's about 2-1, 3-1. So maybe a 33% chance, that he doesn't make it to the second game because of a yellow card. And it's also worth bearing in mind, obviously, there is an FA Cup fixture in the middle of this double as well. But we've got Sterling top 8.4. He could be nailed, but you never know with Potter. I feel like with Mitrovic, if he doesn't get that booking, he's going to start both. So Mitrovic is behind Sterling, but I prefer Mitrovic, absolutely hands down. We've already had confirmation from Silva himself that Mitrovic, yes, he missed a penalty, but he will score the next penalty. So the assumption there is Mitrovic is still on penalties. Mount is just behind Mitrovic though at 7.49. I guess there we saw the stats earlier. Mount stats, they're not as good as they've been in previous seasons, but obviously it's a very short sample size. So Mason Mount, maybe if you're a bit nervous about the Mitrovic yellow card, I think he's the second best captain as it was. I'm just eliminating Sterling as much as I like him because of potential minutes risk. I'd much prefer Mason Mount. Now, what's interesting here is we've got Kepa at 7.19 points projected. So that's interesting. I think a lot of people have Kepa. I don't. He could be, it's really boring. But, with the saves that he's racking up, he could be potentially, for some people, the best captain option. If you're not going to watch the games, just set that captain and you're gonna get a decent return. And then Leno's just behind him at 6.8. Now, what's interesting here is obviously the debate is, do you go for a double game week player as a captain? I think you do. Or Haaland. Haaland's even below Salah here. We've got Salah at 6.32 projected points, and then we've got Haaland at 5.17 projected points. Haaland's even behind Rashford using the Rate My Team tool. So for me, I'm going to go for a double game week player. The way I've got it at the moment, I've got it on Mitrovic, but I completely understand if you're a little bit nervous to go for someone like Mount or go for someone like Kepa. But I think it's a brilliant week to go against it, because I think a lot of people will still captain Haaland, especially with the short turnaround, because a lot of people are going to forget to even set their teams. So I think it's a great opportunity to go for it. Go for a double game week player. I'm going to be going Mitrovic. There's no problem with Mount or Kepa either. So thank you for joining me today for a very, very quick turnaround video, like I keep saying. I think one other thing I just want to discuss is basically, I don't think to go too crazy on these doubles. Now, I've got 5 double game week players myself, but what I did was I set my wild card up when we were on unlimited transfers to try and have my original plan before the James injury was to have 6 Chelsea and Fulham players. So I've gone all in on it. But what I would say is it could be very beneficial to have, if possible, 2 transfers next week, because we might have that Manchester City against Tottenham double. One thing I'll say on that is, obviously, as we've discussed before, Man City need to avoid drawing in the FA Cup, and Tottenham also need to avoid drawing as well. I've seen some odds floating around that it's about 70% chance that neither team draws. But obviously, it could happen. But if Man City have a double and we've got risks over Cancelo and Foden, we probably want to have transfers to attack that Manchester City double game week. So I'd say don't go too all in this week. If you've only got a couple of players, I think you'll be fine. I mean, obviously from a selfish point of view, I hope we get really lucky and get lots of things like players coming off after 62 minutes and then the clean sheet gets wiped out. But realistically, I don't think it's going to be the biggest game week to gain. So good luck for the game week. Hope you all had a happy new year. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll be back next week.